It is such a pleasure to have Andrew Rowan back. He is, to those of you that have followed the show for years, know that he's come on periodically as one of the eminos grises, which we call the graybeards in the animal welfare world. He's been doing this since childhood. Otherwise, how could you look so young, right? You really are an extraordinary voice for animals and for the planet. It didn't used to be the planet, but the planet didn't used to be in as much jeopardy when you began looking after the well-being of animals internationally. The name of the organization and the free newsletter that you have is Wellbeing International. Is that right? Because I read it every month and it's full of absolutely riveting information. You had dolphins and now you have outdoor cats in communities around the world. This is something you followed carefully when you were the head of Humane Society International and is a particular interest of yours. Let's talk about what's going on around the globe for kitty cats that live outdoors.
Okay. Well, the first thing that we should say is that we don't know how many there are. We have a reasonably good approximation for dogs. There are about a billion dogs on the planet, the most successful carnivore in the world.
Wow.
People typically estimate that 70% of them are roaming street dogs, but in fact, the number's only about 40%. So we're only dealing with
Oh,
400 million rather than 700 million dogs. So it's a much easier task. Cats, on the other hand, we just don't know how many there are. And it appears that one of the things that happens here is that when the dog population becomes managed, the cat population begins to rise. So dogs tend to compete with cats for resources and especially safe spaces. And so that's why I think there aren't that many roaming cats in India, for example. Lots in Greece, but not many in India. So just getting a handle on what we're talking about here is very challenging to start with. So that's
well,
the first problem.
let me interrupt by asking something I hadn't realized. That number, that seesaw that you're referring to, fewer dogs, more cats, fewer roaming dogs. Does that mean that the dogs aren't just pleasantly competing for space and scraps? Are they killing the cats? Because
Could
many
be.
of us say that even your neighbor's dog could easily kill your cat. I'm talking about owned cats that people allow to go in and out. The
Yeah,
dogs
it
are
could.
one of their dangers.
Yeah, could be. In America, of course, coyotes are the big danger for
Yeah.
owned cats. You need to be, if you live out west, you need to be careful about where your cat goes at night. Although the cats are pretty good. Stan Gert in Chicago, for example, has looked at both cats and coyotes and finds that the two don't really occupy the same space in
Interesting.
Chicago's green areas.
To
So,
those of us that have never seen a coyote walk around in Chicago, that isn't a surprising fact. But I love the fact that you are in touch with all of the minds that put their IQ to work on behalf of animals around the world, whether it's Chicago or Delhi. I think that's really important that there be this this overwatcher, which is you and Wellbeing International, that look at the big picture, because you have countries like Australia where the, if you will, rabid hatred for free roaming cats is so high. But then again, they have a free roaming bird population, which I recently learned about and I'm going to talk about on the show with Rick Lacuter, of parrots and cockatoos who are wildly destructive.
yeah, that's right. The cockatoos have learned how to open garbage cans. And this is a great source of food for all animals.
And they take pieces off of people's homes and their windowsills.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
not mad at them, but they're very mad at the cats on the theory that the cats are killing all the birds. So,
Right.
what is the truth? There's too much emotion and not enough facts.
It says John Hadidian, a colleague of mine. John was at the wildlife department at the Humane Society when I was there, and John helped create a sort of policy statement on wild animals that and cats that sort of balance the needs of the cats and the wild animals. And so John continues to be my go-to person. He's on the wildlife biology stage in terms of how to should we address cats. And John refers to the cat issue as a wicked problem. So a definition of a wicked problem is one where you just don't seem to get any resolution. You can't get people to sit down and talk through and come to an agreement. They so oppose or stigmatize the opponents that it's almost impossible to have a constructive conversation about what would work, what is the best thing for us to do in this situation.
Which is interesting because TNR, the whole idea that you can reduce the overall cat population by trap, neuter, and returning these cats to a managed colony managed by humans, it doesn't really address the issue of whether those cats still want to hunt. They're
Well,
hardwired to hunt.
and everybody recognizes that the cats will still hunt.
Yes,
And so the compromise position on that is that you don't put cats back in places where there are species in danger.
right,
And so in those circumstances, you catch and remove the cats. You don't there's no return
right.
program. And so so you may argue about, is this a place where we could return or not? But the basic premise here is that both the biologists and the cat lovers have the same interest in heart. They want to reduce the number of cats outdoors because cats outdoors don't do as well as cats inside. There are more dangers. There's disease, there's predation, there's traffic. These are all dangers for cats outside. And so the idea of keeping a cat, shall we say, perfectly comfortable, warm, and muggy is an indoor cat. But
And moggy is a great British word. We don't use it at all in America for
no,
pussy.
I know, but
Moggy, such a great
muggy.
word. So we look at a place like Hawaii, where the cat situation, as I understand it, is, I don't know, over the top, out of control. It's a tropical place with a lot of tropical birds and massive amounts of cats that apparently have overrun certain islands. Is that true?
No, there are lots of outdoor cats in Hawaii. And what's interesting in Hawaii is that the number of owned cats is much smaller than in the mainland.
Yes.
And that's not really, and I think the reason for that is because there's so many outdoor cats that people don't need to have a cat inside. They can feed the cat that's hanging around their back door. So that becomes their cat. And so I think that's what's happening in Hawaii, but nobody's ever really looked at that carefully. But there's an awful lot of exaggeration when it comes to Hawaii. So my first interest in Hawaii came when we organized a conference in Los Angeles on the outdoor cat. And we had a fellow from Hawaii, a wildlife biologist from Hawaii, come, and he said there were 500,000 cats on Maui, the island of Maui. That seemed to me like an extraordinary number to have on this
Yes.
relatively small island. And so we asked John Boone to go out and actually start looking at what the cat population was. And he just looked in the human areas of Maui around the airport and the sort of major towns in Maui and came up with a possible count of, say, 30,000. So now you have 500,000 versus 30,000.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out what the actual, and so you've got these competing narratives that are basically unresolvable. You can't resolve that unless you go out and track this. And one of the arguments that I heard was that one of the reasons why this fellow thought there were 500,000 cats on Maui was because after a fire on Maui, he walked across the landscape and he saw a lot of cat scat. So he estimated from that there were 500,000 cats on the island.
It's madness.
It was extraordinary that some of the claims and some of the arguments people are using in this situation. 30,000 cats we can manage. And the people are managing. Maui Humane Society now has an outdoor cat program. You've got people on Maui who are working to support and feed the outdoor cats and catch and sterilize them. And you see the intake, the Maui Cat Humane Society cat intake has been dropping steadily for 10 years as a result of this sort of cooperative program. And so that's what we want. We want to get people working together in a way that the things. And the other argument is on Maui, there are all sorts of exotic species,
That's right.
plant and animal. And cats, yes, are out there also catching and killing birds. But so are other animals. And what's really dangerous in Maui, the reason why the bird species have been eradicated in Maui is avian flu. There's an avian mosquito is spreading avian flu or an avian disease up to the height of the mosquito. I'm not sure how high the mosquito goes. It's about maybe 1,000 feet. So birds above 1,000 feet survive. Birds below 1,000 feet all die of this
How
avian
interesting.
disease. So that's one of the reasons why there's this huge problem with avian extinction in Hawaii. Cats contribute to it. And all things being equal, we want to reduce the number of cats and keep them away, like the Hawaiian stilt, which nests around a pond on Maui. You want to keep the cats out from around that pond and things like that, keep them away from the silt. And so there are things that can be done here. And if we got together, everybody got together to work at this, I think we could come up with a reasonable response to the Maui cat issue. And on Lahaina, which is one of the Maui County islands, this is the one that Larry Ellison bought.
Oh my.
They've been trapping and sterilizing outdoor cats. And because the cats there are killing some of the ground nesting seabirds. And so these are endangered or threatened species, so they want to address the problem. And so they've got this cat sanctuary. They've got a place in the middle of the island that's fenced in, and there are about 400, 500 cats that have been trapped from the outdoors and put in the sanctuary. And I was there, and the cats seemed perfectly happy. They all nest. They all have their little shelves that they can sit in. They poop in these areas where there are dried husks from a plant that catches the poop. You can clean up the poop easily. It works. I would never have thought that a cat sanctuary would be an answer, but on Lahaina, where there are not that many cats, that's been one of the approaches that has worked. It's run by the Peninsula Humane. Larry Ellison was supporting Peninsula Humane, and so Peninsula Humane is now supporting this cat sanctuary. And so it's now a well-resourced program. And
what a wonderful story that somebody, Larry Ellison is Oracle, right? Considered.
That's right. That's right.
The tech people who are all characterized always as being rude billionaires. But look at this wonderful thing that he buys an island. You think, oh, great. So he bought an island. Who knows what he'll do with it? And instead, he had either himself or wonderful advisors that thought of a really functional, affordable, even to anybody affordable, not just to a billionaire, solution.
That solution was in place before he bought the island.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And so the island it doesn't have many people living on it permanently. What it has has 3 resorts, so a lot of visitors. And it turns out that visiting the cat sanctuary is one of the highlights of the things that you can do if you're holidaying on Lahaina. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. And the cats.
I need to get in touch with them. Somebody needs to make a little film about it and put it in my cat film festival because it sounds so delightful. And cat sanctuaries are usually underwritten by one cat crazy person with a vision, and they work. The cats don't need I don't know what kind of amount of territory a cheetah or a tiger or a lion needs, because you know about all species, but a domestic cat doesn't need a massive amount of space to roam around. They're fine with whatever they're enclosed in. They'll make do.
This sanctuary, I don't know how big it was. It may have been 4 acres, 5 acres, fenced in, a cat-proof fencing. And you go in and the cats come up and they solicit attention, and you can sit there and you can stroke the cats to your heart's content and then leave. The cats have had some TLC. You've had some cat TLC, and everybody is happy.
And you supported a sanctuary doing a proven solution to a problem. The reason I brought up Hawaii is because I felt that a lot of the press that came out, and as we both know, once something gets printed, 500,000, then it gets repeated. Even if a guy out in the charred remains of a fire looks at some cat poop and goes, well, if I do that times 10, it equals 500,000. I mean, it's not science, and it doesn't solve anything. It just stirs up emotions. I just read recently that in Europe, France is the highest cat owning population in Europe, followed by Germany. Is that of interest to you? Cat owning, not community cats, although in Europe, many people have their cats be indoor, outdoor.
Yeah, so I'm interested in pet populations in general.
Yes.
And one of the sort of suggestions I'm making, I haven't actually formally written about this in an academic publication, but there's some very interesting characteristics to the property of dogs per 1,000 people or cats per 1,000 people, the relative number of dogs and cats. And dogs don't exist really outside of human communities.
Right.
They don't really survive well in the wild. Cats do. So that's why counting cats is a more challenging issue. But so if you look at cats per 1,000 people across Europe, the numbers are remarkably stable. And I've got data going back to 1981. And when you translate the actual sort of gross numbers of cats, say there are 6 million cats in England, and that translates to, I don't know how many cats per 1,000 people, 60 million people. So that's
Do the
It's
math.
about 100 cats or 1,000 cats per 1,000 people. So you can get these numbers and then you can just track them. And what is that the numbers hardly change at all from a year over year. The numbers vary according to the human population,
Right.
not according. So everybody talks about how, well, the numbers are exploding. So this is one of the things, one of my sort of hot button items. The
Yes.
conservation biologists write about outdoor cats and say the numbers are exploding. And no, they're not. The numbers appear to be relatively stable, and they appear, as with wildlife populations, appear to be resource limited. And
Right.
so the more resources you provide, the more cats there will be. So in a place like Rome, where people are out there feeding the cats in the public squares, you've got these very high densities of 1,000 cats per square kilometer. But out in the boonies, out in the forests and farmlands of America, you've got about 1 cat per square kilometer.
Well, I did have a friend who has still lives in Rome, and every day, twice a day, because she had the time and the resources herself, she would cook up this huge vat of food for her kitties, who she had paid personally
Yeah,
to have sterilized. And they came to a certain place outside her apartment block every
right.
day, and she fed them. And
Yeah.
she's done the same thing in Greece, where she had a small house. Same thing. But I had a house in the countryside in Italy. I never saw a cat.
Yeah, no, and the
Wow.
countryside, the density is very low because people aren't out there feeding the
That's
cats.
right. That's right. But does that argue against having managed colonies, because those colonies are fed by people, even if,
Well, it does raise the issue of when and how you should do that. So
yeah,
you shouldn't have a managed colony in Rome. We're not talking about much impact on an endangered species, but a
right.
managed colony in the Florida Keys, there are more issues raised. You've got this key down in Florida where the place Orcat is the name of the community, where they have a wood rat that's endangered or threatened, and cats, lots of cats on the island. And so what this project has done has been basically catching the cats when they can, putting them in a shelter like the one in Lahaina, but also sterilizing the cats and it looks as though the population of cats on this Florida Key has gone down substantially. But still there's a real concern. The biologists really don't like the cats being trapped, neutered, and then put back. That's the issue.
Even if they're contained within fencing.
No, cats aren't contained within fencing. Some cats are, but not. But the bulk are out there able to roam freely. But the population was maybe 1,000 cats. It's now 400 cats. But we're not absolutely certain of the numbers. The numbers are rough and crude and so on and so forth. But we can see that there's been a reduction in cat population. So all things being equal, that's no doubt going to help the wood rats. So it's challenging. And if everybody worked together, I think we could resolve this problem relatively quickly. But as long as people are scratching away and arguing back and forth, so the biologists want to trap and kill the cats. Of course, that's anathema to the cat lovers who want to trap and sterilize and put them back and take care of them. And so this is the sort of fundamental issue that divides two groups that want the same thing: fewer cats outdoors.
You look at a place like, I think it was, in fact, Australia, not New Zealand, where not long ago, and perhaps still, they were giving a bounty for people who would skin or decapitate cats, something like $5 a cat. Talk about crude, talk about barbaric in terms of just an ignorant solution. It isn't not a solution, but it was
Yeah, I mean,
Australia, was it
it's
not?
still there. So Australia is trying to eliminate cats from islands. And they've done it successfully out on the west, out in Western Australia, and an island in Western Australia. And the native population is bouncing back because there are no more cats there. They're looking at Kangaroo Island. Kangaroo Island is in the south of Australia, and it was one of the places where the fires really damaged the environment, and so there are about, I don't know, 25,000 people who live on Kangaroo Island, and they have cats. So so as a result, you have outdoor cats because wherever you have people, they feed cats, which aren't their own.
Yes.
So in America, about 10% of households feed cats that they don't own. And that number, 10%, 12%, thereabouts, around about 1/10 of households feeding cats that they don't own. And the interesting thing is, in communities where there aren't many owned cats, e.g., some of the African American communities in Baltimore, cat feeding is at the same rate in those communities as it is in the white communities.
Where
So
they're owned cats.
where there are owned cats. So it's an interesting, the data here throw up all these interesting conundrums and issues. And why is that? How can we make things work more effectively and so on? But the amount of food that's put out in urban areas for cats it was calculated at one point, it was about 5 or 10 times as much food as the cats actually needed. So what they were doing was they're feeding all the other urban wildlife, including rats.
Rats.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? This is the problem with humans, with the unintended consequences, right?
Yeah.
Of choices that are not informed, they're emotional, they're knee-jerk.
Yeah.
And if on one island you can scoop up all the cats, say you don't kill them, you just scoop them up and take them somewhere else,
Yeah.
and it can function, well, but not every place is an island.
That's right. But if there are people living on the island, they will
They'll
have
have
pet
cats
cats.
eventually.
They'll
Yeah,
have pet cats, and those pet cats will find their way outdoors,
well,
and some will go feral. So it's an ongoing issue. Wherever there are people, you're going to have cats.
I
So
think that's really the takeaway, which is you can't eliminate the cats because you can't eliminate the people
that's right.
love them and want them. So you have to come up with a viable solution, something that will work and not bandy around these huge numbers or adjectives like exploding,
Yeah. Yeah.
exploding population or 500,000 cats on this one island. It doesn't solve anything. It just stirs people up to a kind of anger and hatred, and then they have someone they can hate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Other group.
Another one of my hot button items is this issue of exploding cat populations, because if the cat population outdoors is exploding, you would expect to see an increase in a shelter intake of cats. Most cats come in because of owner release, owner surrender, or somebody locally traps an outdoor cat and takes it to the shelter. But you would expect, if there are lots and lots of outdoor cats, you'd expect to see intake and shelters increasing. And yet, in a place like San Mateo County, where Peninsula Humane is located, the number of cats coming into the shelter there, Peninsula Humane is the 1,000-pound gorilla of sheltering operations in San
Yes.
Mateo.
Yes.
And so the cat intake there is likely to reflect what's happening in the county as a whole. So the number of cats that have come into that shelter over the years was about 20,000 in 1970, and it's now about 2,000.
Wow.
And so what you get is this huge reduction in the number of cats coming into shelters. Los Angeles has seen the same sort of reduction in total animal intake and so on, same sort of level of reduction. But the biologists, the conservation biologists, refuse to accept that there's any relationship between cat intake into shelters and the population of cats outdoors.
Because then they don't have the ground to stand on from which they've been
That's right.
against.
But we have two papers, Julie Levy's paper in Florida, in Alachua County, Florida, where her group, her students, catch and sterilize outdoor cats, and they did an intensive catch and sterilization and TNR program for one area of the county, and the same modest TNR program in another area of the county. And what they found was that the area where they were doing the intensive program, sterilizing 15 cats per 1,000 people, the cat population coming into the shelter reduced dramatically. Mm-hmm. Whereas from the control area, the cat population didn't change. The cat coming into the shelter didn't change. And Jackie Rand in Australia has been defying the no TNR rules in Australia. And she's got communities to agree to allow her to do intensive sterilization projects. And lo and behold, cats coming into shelters in those communities have dropped dramatically.
So I guess in concluding, because we've run out of time, there's a lot to be paid attention to. And I really do recommend people subscribe to Wellbeing International. We all have to inform ourselves because ignorance is not the solution. Andrew Rowan, you're amazing. Keep on keeping on and keep all these other wonderful people on your radar. Thank you so much for your time, your passion, and your knowledge.
Thank you very much, Tracie, for your program as well. Thank you.